How many people here know of Moses? Moses? Yes? How many people don't know of Moses? Not the one that leads you to the promised land, although we can do that too. You do have my PowerPoint in your book, along with some handouts. I have some more handouts in the back, and we have a lot of information on our website. So I am Harriet Behar. I'm the Senior Organic Specialist at Moses. I have a certified organic farm where we grow some of our own cover crop seed. We have chickens, and we mostly do vegetables as well as I do medicinal herbs, fresh and dried. So I don't know how I fit all that in. I do have some weeds, so I love listening to Gary how we do cultivate. I was an organic inspector for 20 years. I've been on over 2,000 organic farms. I am currently a member of the National Organic Standards Board. So I'd love to hear your input as far as what you think of the organic regulations, because I am, for the next 4 years, in a position to try to change them, make them more practical. That was the main reason why I wanted to get on the board, was to make the organic regulations more practical. So I'm going to talk today about managing risk in organic grain farming and kind of the organic regulations and how they interface with your organic system plan. And just so you don't get scared, the organic regulation states that every farmer has to have an organic system plan, but we are not going to make you write a narrative and sit down and write this plan. The organic system plan is really part of the application that you put forward with your organic certification agency. Okay, so first of all, I think I just wanted to set the stage that organic is different from conventional agriculture only in a few different ways. Organic uses natural sources of fertility, so no conventional petroleum-based fertility inputs, nothing with ammonium in it is allowed. So we do rely a lot of times, one of the limiting factors is nitrogen. So this is where Dave was talking about if you can produce your own manure, it's going to be a lot less input cost. But you don't really have to have livestock. You'll be more successful if you have livestock, but you can purchase in manures from other people. Of course, then you might also be, if it's raw manure instead of compost, you will be bringing other people's weed seeds onto your farm. So that's one thing that's not as good. Anything that's naturally mined is allowed. So rock powders are allowed, but so for potash, you have to use sulfate of potash, not a synthetically, not superphosphate or whatever. And of course, you can gain nitrogen and other nutrients through cover cropping. Natural methods of weed and pest control, crop rotation, management of, putting in beneficial insect habitat, having things that are flowering, basically, timely cultivation, which Gary did a great job talking about. And then I'll talk a little bit, too, about the organic no-till, which involves a killed mulch. So this is really one of the most important things in organic farming. Yeah, you change a lot what you do out in the field, but really what you need to do is what you're doing in your head. It's a lot about management and thinking about not just this year's crop, but next year's crop, or how you're planning for the future. So really, organic farming substitutes a lot of the inputs, dealing with adversity and risk management, with your knowledge and management. And Gary did talk about that a lot with skill. So over time, you're going to gain that. You're going to gain that from talking to people, and really don't be afraid to experiment on your own farm. So the rule is that if you sell more than $5,000 a year in organically labeled products, you must be certified. So you have to have a yearly inspection on your farm to continue that organic certification and have access to the organic market. So if you're just selling, some strawberries, or you're under $5,000 and you're selling it direct to the consumer, this is really important, then you can if you're less than $5,000, you can be exempt, but you're supposed to still keep all your paperwork and do everything right. if you're just, let's say you're just starting out and you have a little bit of hay that's like certifiable, there's nobody who's the final direct consumer of hay, right? That the organic product would be the beef or the dairy or whatever. And so there is no market for transitional or even exempt from certification hay. So livestock feed can't be sold under that exempt category. There is actually a transition label in development right now by the Organic Trade Association. Some of us were still waiting to see to make a decision if we think it's a good idea or not, because what they're doing is actually making a market all the way downstream. So this would be a transitional egg, a transitional steak, because how can you sell transitional crops and expect the buyers to have a premium if they can't get a premium for the next product in the marketplace? And so there's a little bit of concern, well, is that going to then lessen the value of the fully certified organic product in the marketplace? So we're kind of seeing how that's all going to pan out. We agree that it would be useful during the years where you're learning, so not only are you not getting a premium in the marketplace, but you're also probably taking a hit on yields, right? Because you have to follow all the organic rules, but you're not getting any of the market benefit from that. So that's an issue. I don't know. They're hoping, I think, to have that transition to organic label by next crop year. So we'll see how that goes. That's the Organic Trade Association. I believe they have information on that on their website. So the basic organic certification process is you have to choose an agency. There's a little green book over there on the table with all my handouts. Our website has all kinds of agencies. Probably here in Illinois, there's probably 6 or 8 agencies that are pretty active in your area: OCIA, MOSA, ICO, GOA. I mean, these are all just alphabet soup to you, but there's a variety. They all have the same standard. Okay, so what they compete on is service and price. Okay, there's maybe a few little places. One person might say, we want you to have a 25-foot buffer zone. Somebody else might say 30-foot. But basically, they have the same federal rule, and they themselves are audited by the USDA to make sure that they are implementing the rule the same. So I have a handout, it's in your book, on how to choose a certification agency, some of the questions to help you ask so you can choose. So you send in this application. It's scary, it's like 20 pages, but if you look at it, a lot of it is multiple choice. So it'll say things like, what do you do for soil fertility, right? Cover crops, check. Crop rotation, check. Manure, check. You know, whatever. So it's not that hard. It probably will take you a couple of hours, mostly to pull the information together, because they'll be asking you, what seeds are you planting? What inputs have you used for the past 3 years? Once you pull all that together, that first application does take a little bit of time, but the yearly application is just the things that are changing. So it'll be just basically your seed and your input and what's grown in what fields. So the subsequent applications after the first one are usually only 2 or 3 pages. So you get through the first, and then you don't need to apply for certification until the year that you're actually ready to sell a certified organic crop. So at this time, there really is no reason to get an inspection during a transition year. So the application's received by the agency. They review the application. They may say, oh, you have 6 fields listed, but I only have a map for 3 fields. You know, before I send out the inspector, I need the other 3 maps. Then the inspector comes out. They'll write a report. They'll send it back to the agency, and the agency will either decide to give you certification, deny you certification, or say, I can't give you certification until I know for sure that the non-organic corn seed that you planted was non-GMO, so they might be waiting for further information. The inspection's going to take 3 to 5 hours. They're going to verify that everything that basically you wrote in your application is true. They're going to go to every field. They are mandated by the USDA to visit every field. So then they're going to look, they want to see if there's buffer zones, which I'll get to what that is. They're going to be looking at your projected yields and your storage and your sales. If you say you're cultivating, they're going to want to look at the cultivator. They want to make sure that what you say you're doing, you can actually do. And they'll want to look at the tractors and everything, so that's why it takes that long. Typically, it takes about 50% of the time is inside looking at the documentation, and 50% is outside looking at the fields and the equipment. And it can actually be helpful to have this person on your farm. You don't have to be afraid of them. They can't consult with you and tell you what seed to grow or what inputs to use, but they can make suggestions. They can be a resource of resources as far as what other people are doing, where you can find organic seed, 3 or 4 different people or whatever. So it doesn't have to be a scary experience. It can actually be very useful. And the certified organic growers, you guys all love it the day the inspector comes, right? Okay, so the other thing is there is cost share. So your certification is going to cost you, depending how complex your operation is and who your certifier is, anywhere from $1,000 to $1,200, somewhere in there. But there is certification cost share, so you can get up to $750 back, or 3/4 of the cost of certification, whichever is lower. If you're doing livestock and crops, it would be $1,500 because the $750 is per scope, they call it, and there are 4 scopes: crops, livestock, wild harvest, and processing. So that helps, and that's administered through your State Department of Ag. So you have to submit maps with your fields so that you can do a hand-drawn map, but a lot of these FSA maps are getting much better than they used to be. They're laser printed, and they've done a much, they're not like these fuzzy black blotches. You could actually see that. Well, this one you can't see very good, but you can see if there's woods around. You can see what's the adjoining land, and you can make notes on these maps. So I see some people who actually keep track on the map where they put the manure, by year. So this could be part of your record keeping. It's very visual, and it's very useful for you as well. This is part of the knowledge and management that organic farmers need to have in place in order to be successful organic farmers. They also provide a lot of the information. I'm using the MOSA. They are not related to us in any way, but I just went on their website, got some of their forms. So this would be like a 3-year field history. You can see it a little better in your book, but it actually has there where you can keep track of what your inputs are. So they provide a lot of the paperwork too. Another way to do it would be just keep your own spiral notebook. I don't like the little books that you put in your pockets because they usually end up in the laundry, and then they're useless. So, and really it's important for you to know, you bought this fertilizer, a nice, a pretty expensive blended fertilizer that's acceptable and organic. Was it useful or not? You should be keeping track and monitoring the acceptability and the efficiency of the materials and the activities that you're doing. How late can you plant those soybeans and still get an acceptable yield? I mean, a lot of times, I know people that come in early, they get a lot of weeds, they come in and they till up the whole field and start over. Sometimes you have to do that. How late can you do that and still get an acceptable yield? There's nothing that's going to tell you that in a book. You need to keep track on your own farm what's working and what's not working. And so record keeping, this is everybody's favorite thing to do, right? Right? Keep records and detailed records. I know most people don't like it, but I will tell you that the farmers that I saw, and I've been on over 2,000 organic farms, typically the best looking fields, that farmer had the best records too, because they were paying attention to their historical management practices, and they knew what they were doing. And it doesn't have to be a great detail. How many of you keep track of rainfall on your farm? Just simple things like that. So you get an idea of even which seed varieties did better in drought, and all of these things are important to know. And then there's the important records that you're supposed to have. So basically, you're going to have receipts or labels verifying your seeds and inputs. Even labor that you might have hired, basically to kind of show that what you're saying you're doing, you're actually doing. Your manure applications, your tillage, your planting, your cultivation, your harvest. these are all things that just help you be a better farmer as well and understand if what you're doing is making you money. Long-term field histories, you have to have that to show that the field is actually certifiable. The inputs used, the crop rotations, the yields, but that can all be done on one form. Storage records, what fields did they come from, where they were stored, how much, and to who sold it. So if you had an issue with GMO drift or some other issue, you at least have an idea of what fields went into that bin. And then lastly, you have to be able to show that who received it, how much they got, and that sort of stuff. So you can prove to the certifier that if all of a sudden let's say you have some conventional fields and some organic, and you're allowed to have a split operation. You do not have to have 100% of your operation be organic. But if, let's say, you're saying that your conventional fields are making 80 bushel an acre and your organic fields are making 180 bushel an acre, there's going to be an issue. Because that typically is not the ratio. You can have fairly equal. Over time, you get back up to your conventional yields, but really you should be looking not just at how much is in the bin, but how much you're making per acre. So just another way, and if it's livestock, I'm from Wisconsin, so I always talk about it's not all the milk and the bulk take, it's how much you're making per cow. So this is the definition of organic, and most of us think that organic means no synthetic fertilizers, herbicides, but this is not the legal definition of organic. It's not about what we don't do. It's about what we do, right? It's more of a proactive management system. And this is the definition in the organic law and in the organic regulation, that it is site-specific, and it integrates cultural, biological, and mechanical practices that foster the cycling of resources, promote ecological balance, and conserve biodiversity. So this is kind of a philosophical, but this is also something that is on the ground. And so when you're thinking about the activities that you do on your farm, are you recycling nutrients? Are you conserving biodiversity? Because all those things are kind of tools that help you be more successful in your organic farm plan. In your transition period, you cannot use anything that's prohibited. That includes, be careful of any seed treatments that might not be approved. You are not mandated to use organic seed during the transition, but you cannot use treated seeds that had some kind of synthetic coating. So you have to be careful of that. You have to keep your records so you can show the certifier. The one thing is that during your transition, if you should probably start trialing out organic seed varieties, because these are not going to be the ones that you're used to using. So get a bag of corn and just see which ones are going to be useful for you, so when you are ready to sell an organic crop, you know which varieties grow well for you. So every field must have a distinct boundary and buffer zones. I know a lot of people have been pulling out fence rows to get like one more row of corn, right? So I've seen some people just stick in a T-post and put a bucket on it, and they say that's the line between me and my neighbor. Well, you need to have real clear, distinct boundaries. We need to know where the organic land starts and where the conventional land ends. You cannot have any prohibited substances on that land for 36 months. If there's been spot spraying, basically it throws the whole field out, unless you can really keep track of where that was. And this is 36 months preceding the harvest of the organic crop. So most people are putting on their herbicides in May, maybe June, but there are some people who come in and burn down an alfalfa field in September, thinking, and then they're going to go to whatever the next year. It's 36 months. So in that field that had an herbicide on it in September, you would not be able to harvest, let's say, an oat crop as organic 3 years later, because it wouldn't have been a full 36 months. Okay, does it all make sense? So you count back 36 months to the last application of a prohibited substance. So if you're thinking of being in transition, it's important to keep that date okay? Not just it was spring. Because if you say it was spring, the certifier will take you to June 20th, right? Because it's spring until June 21st. Anything that's fallow, okay? CRP lands, you got a neighbor who, whatever, didn't grow anything on it. You don't have to say, today I'm going into transition and wait 3 years. It's eligible right now, as long as it's been 36 months from the last application of a prohibited substance. And like I said, not all crops and livestock are mandated to be organic under your management. If you're renting land from someone and they don't want you to be organic on that land, you can continue using prohibited materials on that land. The only thing is, when you have a split operation, you will come under more scrutiny by the inspector, because the risk of commingling of non-organic and organic is greater, right? You're going to use the same planters, you're going to use the same fertility inputs or whatever, the storage, all of that has to be cleaned out. As I said, organic is less inputs and more management. You'll be paying more attention to your crop rotation. You're going to be looking at how can you fit in those cover crops. And this is a picture too of rolling rye. Does anybody know about this organic no-till? A few people. This is an interesting method. And I think too there was something I just found the other day, someone who's got a kind of a zone roller that goes right in front of the planter and actually opens the furrow for you. That's Dawn Manufacturing out of Sycamore, Illinois. So there's a lot of variety ways of doing this. And we'll be having actually an organic university all about this next February at the Moses Conference in La Crosse. So we understand that organic is a lot of tillage, and we know that tillage can hurt soil quality. So we're trying to develop methods with less tillage as well, but there's always this concern, well, organic has got tillage and so we're hurting soil quality. Well, we don't talk about, well, what about the herbicides? They're not exactly that great for soil quality either. But there's no tillage there when they do conventional no-till. So in organic production, it's a mandate that you have a soil building rotation, that you are improving your soil fertility, your soil structure, and increasing your organic matter. That's why we rely so much on cover crops, and I love seeing even the conventional guys getting into cover crops, but it drives me crazy when I watch them kill it off with herbicide, because then they lose so much of that benefit, because they're not getting all that increased organic matter except the roots. You must have a true crop rotation in organic. You cannot just be corn and beans. That is not a soil building rotation. So you're going to have to be looking at growing small grains and a legume, some kind of forage. That's where, Dave comes in. But you wouldn't have to have your own livestock. You can see if you've got somebody else who would take some of your forages in rotation. But this also helps you in weed control. It helps you in soil fertility. I mean, a crop rotation, this is where we go back to the time-honored methods of crop production, is really looking at, you need to have a rotation and the multiple benefits that it gives you. And it specifically says in the rule that you cannot grow crops of the same species or family repeatedly in the same field without interruption. So no corn on corn on corn, no beans on beans on beans, not allowed. You have a question?
I was curious, by what metric are they using to define the rotation that builds organic matter in the soil?
Well, they would look at soil testing. The inspector will come out and look at your fields. Now they have, there's an understanding that they're just there once a year. So if you've just come, through 4 weeks without rain, most fields are going to look pretty cracked and problematic. But sometimes inspectors bring along, trowels or shovels, and they're looking for that. And they'll try to see even crop health and vigor. Will also, crop roots, how long those roots go, will kind of be an indicator of the soil aggregates and how healthy things are in that soil. So that's how they're going to judge. And they're going to judge too by your crop rotation, because that's going to tell them too how things are, what you're doing on your land. And so when you're filling out your crop history sheet, if you are doing cover cropping, write it on there. That is a crop. Cover crop is not just because you till it in 4 weeks or 6 weeks later, or especially if you had rye over the winter. Give yourself credit for that cover cropping. The regulation states that you are not allowed to have erosion. If the inspector shows up, now if you had a 4-inch rain right before the inspector showed up, there'll be some understanding of that. But this could be one of the issues that you might have to fix the following year. If the inspector sees a lot of issues with erosion, they might say you need to do some strip cropping, you need to plant along the contour, whatever it might be. They're going to tell you to fix it, because organic farms should be the model of environmental protection and stewardship. So this is I always love this, because I go to some of the conventional shows, the farm shows, and talk to people about organic farming, and they have big signs up that say, "Feed the plant, not the soil." But we feel just the opposite. We feel like we need to feed the soil, not the plant, right? We're trying to promote a healthy ecosystem, and we know that once, I think Dave talked about it and Gary talked about it, you need to kind of pay back. You need to always be looking, and that's why the organic farmer is always looking long term. What's your crop rotation? What you're doing now is going to help you 2 years from now. And so just keep thinking about feeding the soil, protecting the soil, providing that soil biodiversity that's going to help you with plant and weed and pest problems. And it does work. And I'm an organic vegetable grower, and I can tell you that I grow about 4 acres of organic vegetables, and the more I work with my soil, the less problems I have. I have very few insect problems on my farm. So this is the Rodale Institute. Everybody know organic farming and gardening, New Farm. They have a long-term trial. So this is the difference between 20 years of similar tillage intensity, but this one side only has crop residue incorporated, the other one has crop residues, cover crops, and animal manures. Now a lot of people sometimes come in and they transition their worst field to organic first, and then they're kind of disappointed in their yields. Well, you really haven't given it enough time, but you can take really bad soil and improve it in organic. You can't say that in conventional farming. But the organic methods really can improve what you've got. But if I would say, of course, I'm an organic advocate, if you're going to transition land and you're choosing field by field, you should start with your best field, because it's going to give you your best yields and it gives you the best price. And when you want to get the highest price from the field that you're growing, instead of starting out with the worst field. So buffer zones. You have to have a buffer zone between you and any conventional application, whether you're doing it or your neighbor's doing it, or it's the roadside, or it's the utility, or it's the railroad, or whoever it is that's putting a prohibited substance on their land. You will be mandated as an organic farmer to take some of that land out of production on your side of the fence to protect the organic integrity of your crop. And it really depends. The organic regulation doesn't say how big. It just has to be of sufficient size to protect from the unintended application of a prohibited substance. So if they are aerially spraying next door, you might need 100 feet. I don't know. I mean, that's going to be up to you and the certifier to decide. Or if they have an orchard next door and they're doing some air blast sprayer, that's going to be different than the ground driven. The ground driven typically is 25, 30 feet is acceptable, because they don't want to be spraying. That stuff is expensive. They're trying to keep it right down on their own side of the fence. Now, you can put up signs. It's a good idea to let people know, especially if it's the roadsides. A lot of times you can get the town or the county to stop spraying along yours. But if there's some noxious weeds, it'll be up to you to go in and either dig them out or keep them mowed. But if you ever have a drift incident, the more that you have done to protect your land, and I believe in here there's a whole fact sheet on how to protect your land from unwanted chemical sprays, you be much easier dealing with the other person's insurance company if you have done your due diligence in saying, I don't want drift. Because you'll be the odd guy in the county, right? And so they go, I just drift, it doesn't matter, they're growing crops, they're, just get a little extra, herbicide from me, but that's not what you want. You might have a neighbor, though, that maybe they have their road on their side of the fence, or they have a lot of brush or trees. If they'll sign an affidavit that they're not spraying, this has to be done on a yearly basis, then you wouldn't need a buffer. So that's nice. So if you've got somebody, that's only if it's a woodland, you don't have to get any information. But if it's a Christmas tree farm, you would obviously need to get some of this documented. The other thing is, the Farm Service Agency just came out with a new national program that they will pay you CRP payments for your buffer zones. So if you leave your buffer zone in a grass, it doesn't have noxious weeds, they will pay you the standard county CRP payment for your buffer areas. So especially if you have really long, narrow fields and you're losing a lot, this just came out this February, so that was very nice. So remember I said you have to use manure, manure is kind of one of your main sources of nitrogen other than using cover crops. You can buy manure and use it from a neighbor who's not organic, or it could come from your own non-organic herd. But you have to check certain things. We don't care if they were given antibiotics. We don't care if they were given GMO feed. We don't care if they, are confinement CAFO. What we care about is that once it came out of the animal, nothing prohibited was put on it. So if it's going into a manure pit, they didn't put something synthetic in it to prevent odor, or if it's coming out of a digester, they didn't put anything in it to kind of pump up the methane production. If it's a solid pile, they didn't come on there later and spray herbicide to kill off the giant ragweed, or spray it with fly spray to kind of control the flies. That makes it now that manure is no longer acceptable. The only thing that we look at is arsenic. Typically, it had been fed to broilers, but that really has stopped about 2 years ago. So the certifiers are still asking that question, but I think that question will go away. The company that they fed arsenic to chickens to kind of help fatten them up sooner. But they were having so much trouble with the arsenic being in the manure. If you don't believe me, just Google arsenic in manure, and you'll get all kinds of information from Missouri and Arkansas, where a lot of that manure was spread. And it's going into people's wells, and it's just a big problem. So the company that sold that arsenic is now voluntarily stopped selling it. But of course, at any point, they can decide to start selling it again. And so then if you are getting, the other thing too is the bedding. The bedding can't have anything synthetic in it. So if you're getting bedding from, let's say, a window factory where they take, painted wood and things that have been glued and chop it up into wood shavings, that would not be allowed. Raw wood, and the same thing, it could have had GMO corn stalk bedding. Now, if your livestock's organic, all their bedding has to be organic too, because they could possibly eat it, except for wood shavings or whatever, anything agricultural they could eat. But if you're getting manure from a non-organic operation, they could be bedding on GMO, and that's okay. Whether, I think that's okay. Nobody asked me. That's just the law. So here's some organic crop fertilizers. You have this list in your packet. And you have to be careful that mined products only are allowed. So if somebody wants to sell you some gypsum from recycled wallboard, no, think about it. What would it have had? Mold inhibitors, glues, paint. Not allowed on organic land. But calcium sulfate, mined gypsum, go for it. So there it is again, the same thing too. Quarry lime, no problem. But you should be paying attention whether it's a high calcium lime or a high magnesium lime, and look at your soil tests and make sure that you're not throwing your balance out of whack there. Hydrated lime is actually on the national list as an approved material, but only for use in disease control. So people put like hydrated lime in a spray to put like on fruit trees typically. The Bordeaux mix, if you ever heard of that. So the other thing too is if you're going to use things like zinc or manganese or copper, any of those trace nutrients, which are important, you need to have probably a soil test or some monitoring that show that there's a reason for you adding these trace nutrients. Things to look at with fertility inputs, if it's a pellet, what's the pelletizing agent? There are some that are like clay is okay, but synthetics are not. Is there a dust suppressant in there? If there is, it's probably a synthetic and it's probably not okay. Chelators, heavy metals, all these things are looked at. So this is one of the reasons why you're paying the certifier all that money, is you tell them what you want to use and they will research it and make sure it's okay. And the thing is, do you really want to be putting cadmium on your fields? Probably not. And I love this. And in livestock, if any of you have livestock, there's salt. You can buy bag salt, right? Important nutrient for your livestock. But a lot of it has yellow prussiate of soda in it. Anybody ever see that on a bag? Yellow prussiate of soda? Does it sound bad? No. Well, they kind of came up with this name because it's actually sodium ferrocyanide. It's a synthetic anti-caking agent. Because day like today, your salt is going to be one big block, even though it comes in a bag. And we don't allow cyanide to be given to organic animals. So that's, kind of a lot of this stuff is not that easy to understand. That's why you're paying the certifier. So blended fertilizers that you buy need to clearly state all the ingredients. Here's just a list of some of the things that are allowed. Here's some of the things that are not allowed. Even though some people, like to say that Roundup is biodegradable, that's not an approved material. The other thing that's not allowed is no genetically engineered seeds or inputs. There's actually a genetically engineered rhizobial nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Not allowed. So you need to have documentation. You need to be looking at what you are buying. No sewage sludge allowed. And that would include any lime from a sewage treatment plant. Anything that's considered industrial waste, which they tend to like to sell to farmers, don't buy if you want to retain your organic certification or obtain it. And no irradiation. And then, of course, there's no synthetic substances unless they've been specifically approved. And so this is if you're going to rent land or whatever, or if it's not your land, you can get a document from the person you're renting from that they didn't put anything prohibited on it.
There are a huge variety of non-GMO statements from seed companies. Do you have one that you want, or of various, however they
Well,
say it?
there is. That's a tough one. Again, you would have to probably show it to the certifier and make sure they're satisfied with it. A statement that says not the product of genetic engineering would probably be sufficient. Something that said it's been tested and has no presence would be even better.
There's no such thing.
There is testing that they can do.
But there's no such thing as truly zero organic. Zero.
Well, no, that's not true because a lot of the organic seed that you buy has been tested. And part of the reason that organic seed is so expensive is they toss out between 15 and 20% of what they're growing because of the presence of GMO, unfortunately.
And can they say, as I've seen many times, this seed was produced in accordance with generally accepted non-GMO. It had no genetic engineering applied to it, but we can't guarantee that it's absolutely...
That's what, and a lot of the certifiers do accept that they did everything in their due diligence to keep out the GMO. I do see certifiers accepting that, but again, it's up to that's one of the little things some certifiers might say, this is not strong enough, or might say, can they also attest to this? So, before you're buying, but this is where, when you buy organic seed, we don't need a GMO statement. So if you're buying organic seed, you're not going to go through that. It's when you're buying non-organic seed that you're going to have to show the genetic aspect of it. What time am I at? Ooh, I got to keep moving here. I just want to go through this quick. The national list. This is what's allowed and not allowed. And I don't know why the USDA did this, but the rest of the world in organic agriculture has what's called a closed positive list. Everything that's allowed is on the list. If it's not there, you can't use it. Makes it real easy. We did not do it that way. We decided, not me, I'm taking myself out of there. It was decided that all naturals would be allowed and all synthetics are prohibited. And that our national list would be a list of exceptions. And so if it's natural and on the list, it's prohibited. And if it's synthetic and on the list, it's allowed. Let's just make things as confusing as possible. Let's add one more thing into it. It's broken up into crops, livestock, and ingredients and processed products. So you have to always make sure you're looking at the right section of the national list, because like hydrated lime would not be allowed on livestock because it's only allowed for disease control in crops, and it kind of goes on and on. So this is again why you're paying the certifier. They're going to help you, or you can call me. I can help you too. Because it's not always easy to know, is something natural or is something synthetic. So an example of a prohibited natural is arsenic is actually on the national list. It's natural, right? It's an element, but it's on the national list, so therefore it's prohibited. The other thing too is when you're doing pest, weed, and disease control, there's a hierarchy where you have to do cultural, biological, or mechanical practices first. Then you can use natural inputs before you can use any of the approved synthetics. So organic is not input substitution. Okay? It is a management system. It is based on knowledge and skill. It is based on ecological balance, not based on that list of approved synthetics. And so this is how you can keep track of what you've been doing. There is documentation. They try to make it as easy as possible to keep your documentation. I kind of already talked about this a little bit, the roller crimping. And there are people who do it with a flail mower. I think Erin Silva's here. She's tried it. A researcher from the University of Wisconsin has done a lot of work on this because we're very excited about this. Tried to do it on my own farm with not a lot of luck, but I'm going to keep trying. As Gary talked about, be shallow tillage as much as possible. I know you guys all love equipment. It's like the favorite part of farming, right? Having the big toys. So you can have all kinds of equipment when you are an organic farmer. And a lot of times when I was an organic inspector, especially if you're, a lot of this stuff is like sold like iron, like junk prices. All kinds, get a Danish, tine and get a sweep, get a buffalo, you get yourself a tine weeder, you get all, Lilliston weeders, all these things, flame weeders, all of them have their place in organic production. Of course, that's so exciting when you can be out there flaming the weeds. Then the neighbors, they get all excited too. So you have to plant organic seeds unless you can do, once you're finally certified. You have to be able to show the certifier. Once you're certified, if you don't use organic seed, then you have to prove that you couldn't find it in the variety, the quality, or the quantity that you wanted. Now, the wording is actually equivalent variety. So if you are using non-organic seed when you're certified, and the reason that you're buying it is that's your brother-in-law who sells you seed, and you can't stop buying from him or your wife will divorce you, That's not a good enough reason. And if you are using non-organic seed, you should probably be trialing out organic varieties at the same time to show the certifier that you are at least moving towards purchasing organic seed. And to speak for the organic seed producers, they are really working at putting characteristics in those seeds that you need. What did Gary say? You want that crop to jump out of the ground fast. What else do you want it to do? You want it to canopy quickly, right? Because that's going to help you with weed management. These are not traits that conventional farmers care about. They're just trying to get more population out in the field, and they don't care how quickly it comes out of the ground because they're putting fungicides on it, and they're planting when the ground's still frozen, it seems like. So we need to be supporting the organic seed producers, and they are doing the work for you in getting you the characteristics that you need under organic management. You don't have to use organic seed during the transition years. And then lastly, high price is not an acceptable reason to not buy organic seed. That's not part of the criteria. And then this is where you can keep track of what seeds you used, who you searched for the organic seed that you were looking for. GMO drift. So you can have GMO presence in your final crop, and it does not lose its organic certification. However, your buyer may choose not to take it from you. So what's really important, whenever you're shipping organic grain, that you keep back a sample. So if they want to know, if they say that you had GMO drift and they had this much presence, you at least can test it on your own and make sure. Of course, good idea too, vomitoxin and mycotoxins, and always keep a sample back. And by bin. So typically what happens is livestock feed is not tested as much as human grade feed. Basically, if it's going to the human market, every load is being tested. So you need to be really careful and make sure that you've done what you can. Now you can talk to your neighbor. You can find out if they're growing corn this year, you grow beans. Right? There's things that you can do to try to protect yourself. Typically, you're planting later than them, but depending on the weather, they could plant this 3 weeks before you, and if it's a hot year and your crop grows fast, you could be pollinating at the same time. Now, soybeans don't have as much of an issue as corn. The genetic drift on soybeans is really not that much unless there's a lot of honeybees around. But this is a tricky issue that is not completely decided yet. There's some call for possibly having a similar tolerance to the European market, which is 0.9%. The non-GMO project for human grade food, it's 0.9%. For livestock feed, it's 3%. And they still consider it quote unquote non-GMO. I know you guys are right here in the belly of the beast with GMOs. So this is a challenge for you. But I guess we can let some of the organic farmers talk about how they deal with it. So in handling, there's a prohibition that no non-organic can commingle with organic, and no organic can be contaminated by prohibited substances. So if you've used phostoxin in your bin to control insects or anything in your bin that's not an approved organic insecticide, you're going to have to come in that bin, rip out the air floor, and wash that thing down. Okay? Even if it had conventional grain in it, you're going to have to lift up that floor too and come in and vacuum it. Because especially if it had GMO, the GMO traits are in every speck of dust. It's in the DNA. The last thing you want to do is put organic grain in a bin that has GMO dust underneath the air floor and then turn on the fan. Because what you're going to get, right? You're going to get all that dust up in your grain. So there is an organic herbicide that you can use around the edges of the bin for those of you who feel like you want to kind of clean up around this. It's a acetic acid and citric acid blend. Not allowed out in the fields, but you can use it around your storage if you want. but no commingling. The certifiers usually like those bins numbered. They love it when you have the word organic written on the organic bin, especially if you're storing non-organic on the same farm, so there isn't some accident where somebody backs up to, right? All of a sudden you're gone and your neighbor comes over and helps the guy load out the bin and they took the wrong corn. It will ruin your reputation forever. Okay, so there is, you have to clean all your equipment between non-organic use and organic use. If you have, 1 minute, if you have saddle tanks on your tractor, or tanks on your planter, or you've used treated seed in your planter boxes before planting organic, you have to clean them out. And you have to document what you did. And the certifiers can give you paperwork if you want to help you keep track of that, or you can put it in your little spiral notebook. The other thing too is if you are harvesting or a custom harvester comes to your farm, they're supposed to open all the doors, run that combine empty. You get in there with the air compressor or the shop vacuum, whatever you can do, and you're going to run a purge. So you're going to go into the organic field and you're going to take some of the organic crop and kind of scour that combine clean. And then you're going to keep track of how much you did. There's no specific amount because it'd be different if they were doing 4 rows or 12 rows, right? The amount of the purge is going to be different. So you need to kind of keep track. Usually about a 4 row, it's about 40 to 50 bushel. You can take it from there. If you're making silage or you're making large square bales, or they're doing some kind of inoculant, it has to be approved. Calcium propionate as a preservative is not allowed, but lactobacillus, which is a bacteria, right? That's an allowed bale or silage inoculant. So it's not like we don't have tools, we just don't have all the tools that are out there available. So this is just keeping track of the purge, and this is like showing the bin number. If you're harvesting your buffer zones first, that's non-organic. If you don't have it like in grass, let's say you're growing up to the fence, your corn, and you say, I'm going to take off 30 feet of corn, right? Then you'll have to purge after the buffer zone. That's it. So that's the organic rules. And I just want to say too that Moses has we have information there. You have our website, you have our phone number. Give us a call. Any questions? We love talking through and giving you options. This is one thing that the certification agencies can't do. They can't consult with you. If you're like, I don't know how to do, I don't know what crop rotation, or where can I sell my crop, or where can I buy organic seed, or any other issue you might have. Moses is there to help.